So if you're a business owner looking to go offshore, one of the first decisions that you're going to have to make is where are you going to form your company where most of your business is going to be run through. So seeing as on this channel, I mainly cover Asia and the Middle East because these are the locations that I am personally mainly based in. And there's, by the way, a lot of great reasons to be based out of Asia. I think Asia is the future. In this video, I wanted to compare specifically two Asian business structures, specifically the Hong Kong company and the Singapore company. If you had to choose one of these two company structures, which one should you pick? Because there's a lot of different considerations when choosing a company that most people don't even really think about, and it goes way beyond just taxes. So this video is specifically going to be focused on a Hong Kong company and a Singapore company, i.e. where to get better banking, payment infrastructure, taxes, all the considerations regarding whether you can get residency by these companies. And I'm going to make an entirely separate video, a part 2 to this video, about where you should actually live from Singapore or Hong Kong, because you could live in one place and set up the company in other if you wanted to. So the first thing to talk about is the setup process and cost. So for both of these companies, the good news is that you can set them up without being a citizen, without being a resident. You don't even need a residence permit or to even set foot in one of these places to set a company up. The setup is going to be very fast for both of them. Now they have slightly different requirements. You're going to need like a local nominee director in Singapore. If you're not a Singapore resident yourself, you're going to need like a local company representative and a secretary and things like that. In Hong Kong, you're going to need a registered address in both of these places. So there's a couple of sort of checkbox that you need to check when setting up either of these companies. But what I would do in either case is just to use a service provider to essentially handle all these steps for you. So you don't need to go and look for a local nominee director or a secretary or any of these things, because it really shouldn't be complicated. And as a business owner, you should focus your time on making money, not worrying about these administrative steps. So for whichever company you choose, the contact that I would use and who I've partnered with on this channel is awesome. They have, I believe, the best setup services for both Singapore and Hong Kong companies. They will essentially take care of all of the setup steps that you need to get your company set up in very, very little time. And they will also handle all of the annual compliance to actually keep your company compliant throughout its lifetime. They will give you a company accountant. They will handle all the filings, things like that. So you don't need to worry about any of these things. And in the case of Singapore, they will also help you file your employment pass application for you if you do want to use this company to relocate to Singapore. More on that later in the video. In the case of a Hong Kong company, the pricing starts at just $746 for the essential package, but I would highly recommend going with the comprehensive package because it's going to include everything that you need, and that you can get for only $1,000 a year. In the case of Singapore, the pricing is slightly more expensive at $2,326 if you're a foreigner, but you don't want to use this company to relocate to Singapore. If you do want to relocate to Singapore, the cost is going to be $2,358 for them to essentially handle the employment pass application for you as well. So for either of these services, you can use my link down below in the description to get 16% off whichever package you use. And thank you for Awesome for sponsoring this video and being a partner of the channel. So the first big consideration is obviously going to be taxes, because a big reason for going offshore and thinking about where to set up a company is going to be the taxes that you get. So we sort of need to break this discussion down into two parts. First, we have this scenario where you have this company and you live and operate that company from that same country. And we have a second case where you just want to set up the company in Hong Kong or Singapore, but then live in some other country, which you of course can do. So first, talking about the scenario of resident companies where you have the company set up in the country and you also operate it from there. So your company and yourself personally as well become a tax resident where you form the company. So first, in terms of Singapore, we have a corporate tax rate of 17%, which is not super high, but also not super low. However, and I made a more detailed video on this, you can optimize this tax situation a lot depending on your income level. Because first of all, you have a lot of startup exemptions. So for the first couple of years of you running the business, you're going to have 75% exemption, or I believe the first 100,000 Singapore dollars of profit, and then a 50% exemption on the next $100,000 of profit. And in terms of your personal side, because there is no dividend tax in Singapore, you can essentially pay yourself in such a way that you only pay yourself salary up until the point where those personal tax rates would go above whatever your corporate rate is. And then beyond that, you just pay dividends. So your maximum tax rate on all of your income paid all the way to yourself personally should never go above 17%. And Singapore also has a territorial tax tax system, and these taxes will only apply to Singapore sourced income. However, there's a small asterisk to that, which is that even non-Singapore sourced income will be taxed in Singapore if it is brought into Singapore. So if it is brought into a Singapore bank account. I will cover more on that in a second, but that's just something to know. In case of Hong Kong, it is slightly more favorable in the sense that the corporate tax rate is 16.5%, but for the first 2 million Hong Kong dollars of profit, which is around 200,000 something US dollars, it is half that, so 8.25%. And there's also no dividend taxes in Hong Kong, and this also only applies to Hong Kong sourced income, and it's much more easy to get out of paying the tax if you do not have Hong Kong sourced income. So talking more on that, so let's say your company is non-resident, so you set up, let's say, a Hong Kong company, but you live in Thailand or Indonesia or something like that. What is the tax situation there? Well, here Hong Kong is going to be much more favorable, because for Singapore companies, like I mentioned, while they do have a territorial tax system, the difficulty is that even money brought into a Singapore bank account, even if it is foreign income, even for non-resident companies, is going to be taxed in Singapore, which sort of makes it difficult to avoid paying Singapore taxes for a Singapore company, because most likely your banking is going to be a Singapore bank account. In the case of Hong Kong, they have what is called the offshore exemption, which has historically made it a very popular, in fact, probably the most popular choice for offshore companies, simply because if you do not have any Hong Kong income, you do not operate this company from Hong Kong, you don't have any employees there, you don't have any warehouses there, nothing like that, you can apply for, and in theory, it should be accepted, the offshore exemption, which means that all of your company, or at least all of your non-Hong Kong profit for this company, is going to be completely exempt from tax in Hong Kong. Now, it is a bit of a process to apply for it. The way it essentially works is that you apply for it, and then you're like provisionally approved on the moment, so you don't have to pay taxes, but it can actually take multiple years for the final approval to come. So in that meantime, you still should do everything that you would normally do in a business, like do deductions and things like that, just in case it is not approved. Now, if you work with a proper professional who knows how to file this application properly and help you, this should not be an issue, but that is just something to keep in mind. But in all likelihood, if you actually genuinely don't have any Hong Kong income, and by the way, they will actually look into this, so you actually cannot have any connection to Hong Kong, you cannot live there, you can run a Hong Kong company fully zero tax, which is a big benefit of using this company structure if you don't actually want to live in Hong Kong. Now, talking about the next important thing, which is path to residency. So can you use these companies to get residency in one of these countries? A big benefit of, for example, the UAE company, and the primary reason why I have a UAE company, because just by setting up a UAE company, I can get a residence permit in the UAE. Now, in the case of Singapore, you can use a Singapore company to yourself move to Singapore. Now, it is a bit more of a process than in the case of the UAE, where you can just hire yourself and automatically get a visa in like 2 weeks. It's not quite that easy. What you need to do is essentially hire yourself and then apply for an employment pass, which is going to be sponsored by your company. Now, this is not going to be automatically approved. You need to pass what is called the Compass Points system. So they have different criteria based on which you're going to get points. And it's a very easy system in the sense that the criteria is very clear, and there's a very clear points threshold that you need to pass. So if you get enough points, your employment pass application should be approved. It's things like how much you pay yourself, do you have a degree? Again, I've covered this in more detail in other videos, but essentially, if you just pay yourself enough, like let's say you can pay yourself even 5 to 10,000 Singapore dollars a month, especially if you have any kind of degree, you should pretty easily qualify for this. And if you don't have a degree, you are still going to be able to qualify. You just need to pay yourself a bit more. The Hong Kong company, however, you don't really have this benefit. You cannot really, at least that I am aware of, use the Hong Kong company to just directly hire yourself and get a work visa or anything like that. They do have their own quality migrant scheme where they have a similar kind of point system. Now there, the process is a bit more unclear as far as I'm aware. I haven't looked into it in that much detail. I haven't gone through it myself, so I can't really comment on that, but you can move to both of these places. But if you want the process to be easy, then the point is going to go to the Singapore company, because you can more easily and more clearly use it to relocate to Singapore if you want to live in one of these cities. The next thing to consider is annual compliance. But what a lot of people do is they look at how easy it is to set up a company, but they don't look at what it actually takes to maintain the company and not get fined and things like that. Now, for both of these, you need to do accounting, like normal things you have to do for pretty much any company out there. Filing the forms and everything like that, it's not going to be particularly difficult as far as I'm aware in either of these places. Again, you just use a professional in any place to do this for you, so it's not really going to matter to you too much. The one thing to consider is that with a Hong Kong company, every Hong Kong company needs to have audited financial statements every single year. So this is not just in the case of an audit or anything like that. Every single Hong Kong company needs audited financially. So in that sense, the Singapore company is going to have an advantage in terms of the ease of running the company. However, once once again, if you just use the proper professional, like Awesome, they will obviously help do this for you. So it's not something that you have to worry about, but it's just going to be a slight increase in cost. The next important thing is banking and payment processing. A big reason to consider either of these companies over many other company structures is you can get very good banking and payment processing for both of these companies. You can get access to Stripe, pretty much any payment processor you want. Obviously, both of these places have excellent banking. Singapore is going to stand out because Singapore banking is widely seen as pretty much the best banking in the world. However, with both of these, if you are a non-citizen / non-resident, you're most likely going to start with one of the EMIs like fintech banks, because from what I have heard, it has become more and more difficult to get like proper boots on the ground banking for a Hong Kong and Singapore company, and pretty much any company out there, unless you have proper real substance in the country. There's a big trend in the offshore space right now. If you want to access the best infrastructure for any company structure, the more actual substance, meaning employees, meaning an office, like actual operations in that country you have, the easier it is going to be. However, you can get banking for both of them. Although if you don't have much operations, let's say you are not living in one of these places, you don't have anything to do with one of these places, you're most likely going to be using one of the EMIs, which is going to work really well at the beginning of your business. But if you have a lot of revenue, a lot of business being done by these companies, that might be something that you need to get the help of an expert with. Now, if you use Awesome services, they're going to have connections to these banks, so they can essentially help you get these accounts directly. So that is again another benefit of just using the right service provider, but that is on banking. So in conclusion, I think there's a pretty clear conclusion here. If you want to live in Singapore, as in you want to use this company to relocate to Singapore, definitely set up a Singapore company. However, if you don't want to live in Singapore, that is, you want to live either in Hong Kong or in some completely different country, then you'll probably want to choose the Hong Kong company simply because the offshore exemption is easier to get. However, you need to consider that you have those audited financials that you need to do every single year. Obviously, many different options out there. I just wanted to compare these particular structures in this video. Now, if you're interested in setting up a Singapore company, you can watch this video right here for the exact process on how to set one up. If you want to set up a Hong Kong company, however, you can watch this video right here for how to set up a Hong Kong company as a foreigner. So watch one of these videos next, and I will see you in the next one.